Hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. We've got a February guest speaker today. I'm here with Natalie Cook and she is absolutely amazing. You mamas are gonna love her. We are talking today all about stress and self-care and just kind of mama love. And well, I mean, I may as well just leave you to introduce yourself because I'm just going to muck it up. She's got so much amazing goodness to share with you.
Oh, thank you. All right, yes, I'm Natalie Cook. You can think of me as a cultivating calm expert. I help mums who struggle with chronic stress and anxiety and overwhelm just to feel more ease and joy so that they can parent from a place of calm and presence. I work a lot with mums who share a connection-based parenting approach and who even though they really feel like they want to show up as the calm, compassionate mum, struggle at times. And I think we all do. Even if we aren't all honest about it. I have a background as a physiotherapist and a craniosacral therapist, and I've done training in a bunch of things, motivational interviewing and Pilates rehab and all sorts of things related to mind, body medicine and stress management. And I worked in the field of chronic pain for many, many years, which is how I really ended up in the field of chronic stress, because the two tend to go hand in hand. And now I work with moms because I'm really passionate about supporting kids to be able to muck up, have their big feelings, and grow up to be adults who find it a little easier to be kind and compassionate and feel angry and sad and happy and lonely and to grieve and to just feel all the range of human emotions. And in my work as a cranial therapist, I've come to realize that a lot of that gets suppressed in us in childhood when we're taught to just behave well all the time and not feel our
Good
feelings.
kid. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but actually being able to hold space for a child that's spinning out is not as easy as it may sound reading the books. And it's also really hard if we've got our own stuff that's being triggered, our own buttons being pushed at the same time related to our own childhoods. So I really felt like I wanted to support parents and particularly mums, because let's face it, it still is the way it is, that it's mostly mums doing most of the work. So they're lovely dads. Our dad is great too, but he's not around as much. So it's the mums who have a lot to do. So that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing. Yeah.
There are a few dads in the group, but yes, definitely mostly mums. And I mean, how well does this fit with the sleep and sanity theme of this group, right? Like, I feel like we all have this idea of how we want to parent and how we're supposed to parent. And, you know, so many of us are reading the books. And like you said, it's so much harder to do than what the books imply, right? And so, yeah, thank you so much for joining us here today. I guess, you know, the biggest thing, or well, let's start here. I mean, you've been working with moms for a while, and I remember before when we were talking, you mentioned that, you know, you're seeing certain themes. And I guess I'm wondering, because a big part of what I like to do is I like to myth bust and I like to normalize and educate moms on like the big things that so many of them are struggling with. And so I guess, what is one thing that you just wish that all parents knew? Like, that you could just like shake them and get it in, knock it into their brains, you know? What do you feel as a clinician that you are having to repeat over and over and over to moms?
That is such a good question. And there are a few, but if I think of the one that's bubbling to the surface for me right now in my work, and that I find myself writing about a lot and talking about a lot, it's perfectionism and self-criticism and the role that plays in perpetuating stress. Because as you mentioned, we all have this idea of what makes us a good mum. And we have these expectations of ourselves and our kids and of how everything's going to go. And then if we don't live up to these expectations, then we feel like we failed. The next thing we know, we're, you know, turned into Agatha Trunchbull from Matilda, and our kids are going to hate us and we're messing them up. And it's a spiral. And, you know, you can tell I know it pretty well, but perfectionism and self-criticism, which have their gifts and are very much honed in our society and in our schooling, play a major role in what makes a lot of us stress. You know, how should kids be? I'm sure you see it all the time, what they should be sleeping like and how you should be putting them to sleep. I know I had this idea that, like, before I had kids, I was that mom that would say, well, if you just don't go to them, they won't expect it and they'll just sleep, and you just leave them in the room and they'll just learn. And of course, I came to being a mom. It's like, what do you mean, leave my child? No.
Doesn't work. Aren't they supposed to be sleeping by themselves by now?
Totally.
Yeah.
How they should be sleeping, how they should be eating, how they should be behaving. I mean, I have 2 kids with their own very unique personalities, as all people and kids do. And one of them struggles a lot with emotional regulation, and he's 10. And I found myself the other day going, you know, he's 10, he really shouldn't be freaking out over the seams in his socks anymore. And I caught myself, I was like, there it comes again. So if we can just embrace what is and be present with what is, we'll be a lot less stressed than if we're constantly striving for what isn't. And I think along with that, I often talk about how that really gets to a lot of people, because it's like, well, if I'm not trying to get better, am I just like giving up and not even trying to improve the situation? And what I always say to that is, but does it improve by beating yourself up over the head? Like, there's 2 options here. You can be kind and compassionate to yourself and say, know better, do better, I'll do better next time, and give yourself some grace. Or you can beat yourself up over the head. And the latter doesn't actually help with improvement either. There's heaps of research to support that as well. So it's not getting you where you want to go either. So it's not another option. It's not a better option. Yeah.
And so much of these things that we're trying to do better for and feel like we need to do better for, so much of them are normal, right? And there's like, you know, it's like almost like we're expecting this perfection of our kids right away too. It's wow, this is really profound. I love it.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, I mean, I recognize this in myself. Like, you know, I do know better. You know, I've can't even count how many parenting books I've read and courses I've taken, and I still struggle, you know, with like, you know, kids that don't want to go to bed one night, or getting frustrated about something and raising my voice, or all these different things. And, you know, I'm wondering, what are some common things? Like, what do you see most often in the moms you're working with that are kind of signs that they might be able to recognize that they're starting to lead down this path, that they're, you know, feeling that they're maybe, you know, expecting too much, or that they're too perfectionistic, or that they're too stressed, you know, or like a sign that they need to calm down, if that makes sense, right? Because like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm getting better at that. I'm getting better at recognizing when I'm like, okay, Maisie, stop. But, you know, a lot of us, like, it took me a long time to get here. A lot of us, I think, are just oblivious. And then it's like we go from 0 to 60, and it's like, can we backtrack and recognize this?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can answer that question in a couple of different ways. There's definitely signs that we can notice, but they're often the ones where our bodies are screaming at us. And I guess the work I do with people is all about coming back to how do we recognize sooner, so we don't get there and we don't have to pull ourselves back from having tripped over the edge as often. It'll still happen.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
It's not going to be perfect. It's still going to happen.
We can't have perfect in our.
And I have to keep reiterating that, you know, like even with, you know, the work I do, like I run a course called Grow Your Calm. And I often sit and go, well, I really don't want to be perpetuating this idea that we have to be calm all the time. But probably the primary thing that the mums that I work with notice, and actually personally as well, I know that I need to backtrack when I'm starting to lose my patience and snap. And you know, yell is probably one of them. Yelling, let's just put it out there, because it's none of us like to do it, and most of us do it at some point, and then we can go to bed feeling super guilty, again beating ourselves up for not doing it right. And sometimes I think And I know that I'm sure you're familiar with Deborah McNamara, and I know that she's written a piece on guilt and how it does have some, value. No one should feel great about yelling at their kids, but it's about giving yourself some grace for that. But yelling, losing patience, irritability, and pain is a big one, which is kind of the doorway I came into this. Like suffering from chronic illness is when it's really gone quite far. Autoimmunity, that's when your body's just being pushed to the end. There's lots of things that cause autoimmunity, and stress is one piece of the puzzle, a big piece of it.
A big one, yes.
Yeah, and I work a lot with women who have various chronic illnesses as well. So that's when it's really being pushed, when your system's so depleted that your ability to compensate for new stresses is just not even there at all. And that's when you need support, really, like from whatever support you can find.
So yelling and irritability and losing your patience and things like this, signs that something's not working and we need to practice.
And the guilt, if you're going to bed just feeling guilty all the time, your mindset and how you're treating yourself is showing up there. If you're spending more time on all the stuff you've done wrong than the stuff that you've probably done right, which probably far exceeds the things you've done wrong in a day, that's probably also a sign that your stress levels and your levels of exhaustion are pretty high as well.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And for any of you wondering, Deborah McNamara, she is an author and she has a great book. What's it called? Rest, Play, Grow.
Rest, Play, Grow, yes.
Rest, Play, Grow. It says making sense of preschoolers or people who act like them. Something like that.
Everyone, basically.
Or anyone who acts like them, which is, but super worth a read if you're interested. Okay. So, I mean, what advice would you give? Like if this is someone you're working with and they're, laying in bed feeling guilty, or they are, snapping and losing it at their kids more than they'd like to, or at their husband, or they're ignoring it all and they're just like plunking them in front of a TV all day because they just can't handle it.
Mm-hmm.
What advice could you give moms?
I love that you brought that up, because there are many of us who do respond to stress by withdrawal, and actually just zoning out, and it's like a freeze response, in the fight, flight, freeze response. And it's not, it's good to know and recognize what your stress response is probably the first piece of advice that I give, is like, are you someone who
listen to your body?
Yeah. So it doesn't really matter whether you go the sort of fight, yelling, stressed out response, or the zone out, I'm just gonna like remove myself from the room, or just stop talking, or just wash the dishes and just pretend it's not whatever it is that you do. The first piece of advice I always give is to come back into your body. So I have a free resource, which I'll give you the link to, which is called Find Your Calm, a journey for mums. And in it, I lay out a few ways that you can do this. But the one that I find the most helpful for me is to feel my feet. Just find my feet on the ground and just feel into them until I feel myself settle. And you need to have an awareness of your body to do that. So it's like starting to just notice when you're stressed, what does it feel like in your body? When you're feeling like you're zoning out, like, are you even in your body? And it's coming down into your feet. That's a very practical, in the moment. You can do that wherever. In fact, I just wrote a piece for my Facebook group about when my youngest was 2, and when he used to go to sleep. You'll appreciate this. He's just one of those kids who's wired and zooming around the bed and organizing his toys. I mean, he still, last night he was doing that because we started school today. He organized his toys for half an hour. I knew he was pretty stressed. And I learned, and I decided, I know how I'd do this. If this was a client of mine being all stressed and wriggly on the table, I'd just hold space and just go into my body, settle myself, follow my breath, and just let things be. And he's amazing. He goes from hero to zero and like that. It's a 20-minute process getting him to sleep that way, and like a 2-hour process if I try all the I'm just going to come back when you're ready things. So we can do that for ourselves, just be in our bodies and just come out of the thoughts every time you're back in the thoughts, back in that height. And most people feel stress from here up, like some form of it. There's often a throat, there's often a tightness in the chest. Some people it's like their head's going to explode. Very few people feel it from the waist down, like there's a lot of abdominal stuff. So if you can get down into your feet, it's just like a band-aid approach. It's just in the moment. But in terms of longer term, it's really worth, there's a few different things that need to be taken into account as to why your system is so edgy in the first place. When your kids are really little, a lot of it's got to do with sleep deprivation and just the sheer intensity of that stage of parenting. But if that kind of doesn't go away and you still find yourself there, it's looking at like, well, what buttons are being pushed and what beliefs do you have that are creating this moment for you to be stressful? Like why are you reacting in the way you are? So I do a lot of work around looking into where these old feelings come from, and I guess working with the inner child that may have had a difficult experience at some point, often the same age as our kids are at the time when we're being triggered. And there's a huge piece which covers all of this. So like, it's like, this doesn't matter what you're working on, whether it's perfectionism, the inner critic, inner child stuff, it's compassion for yourself. Just, and I say just that, there you go. Just, if you go, just be more compassionate to yourself. But yeah, it's not that easy. Like, where do you start? So I think having an approach where you actually first get a sense of what compassion feels like to give to someone else in your body, like really know what it's like to give to someone else before you then try and turn that on yourself, is a really helpful way to do things. So kind of an embodied sense of, well, when I'm feeling really compassionate to maybe even your child or your baby that's got colic, and you're not exhausted in that moment, you're actually in a moment of heightened compassion. Poor baby, what can I do? Wish I could help you, but I'm just going to hold you because I know there's nothing I can do, because we just have to move through this. That's that feeling. Well, for me, that's what evokes compassion. For some people, it's animals or dogs, or thinking of a best friend going through something. And it's just find a way to figure out what it feels like for yourself to give it out, and then see what it feels like to turn that on yourself. Even if it's not easy, that's good information. And be okay with where it's at. You know, it's not so easy. Fine. Right now, it's not so easy, and just keep checking in.
I love that. I love that. And you know, like, it makes me think of like things that I hear from parents often, you know, is like, I don't have time, or you know, like, I try, but I just can't, or it lasts only 2 minutes, or, but, you know, I really loved your example a minute ago where you had mentioned that, you know, your child is struggling with bedtime and anxious about school the next day, and that, and how really magical it can be, how we can influence others when we do find our calm. You know, like, I know that the nights where I'm, you know, in my zone, I found my chi or whatever, bedtime is a dream. The nights where I'm rushing and I've had a client and I'm like speeding through dinner to like be with a client to like be to bedtime, like there's no way they're going down smoothly on those nights, right? Like, so, you know, it's not just all about our own self-care, that this stuff helps our kids too. And I think
hugely.
The reason I want to mention that is because, like, I feel like it's a bit of a buy-in. Like, maybe we can kind of convince some of you guys to practice some of this, because so like, as moms, we're like martyrs, right? We don't ever do anything for ourselves, but this is a double win. It's for us and our kids. And then we're teaching our kids to be able to do this to their kids, right? So there's a generational element here that can happen, not just through the nurture, but actually through our nature as well. Like, this stuff is can be handed down to our kids through our genes, right? So
yeah, I love that you mentioned that, and that's a big part of why I do this, because as I said, I feel I'm really quite passionate about not having too many more adults lying on therapy tables feeling like they can't
Right.
feel because they were told to just stop crying, or it doesn't hurt, or you're cold, or you're hot, or just having their entire sense of themselves suppressed because it was controlled. And that kind of parenting is actually a lot harder to do than the controlling behavioral type of parenting. And you don't see results straight away. And it probably does push on our buttons a lot more, because we start to realize where we didn't receive that same level of nurturing, just because it's just how it was. It's nobody's fault. It's not a blame game. But I know so much from being a therapist. As a craniosacral therapist, the biggest thing we're ever taught is our state of being, our resonance, our nervous systems have a knock-on effect, not just to children, but to the people lying on our table. They actually attune to us. And so if as parents we can be calm and find our calm, like you said, they attune to us. But it's okay to have all those cool tools to do in the moment, but ideally you don't want to have to feel like it's like climbing a mountain every time you do it. You want to make sure your system's not having to go to like 10 out of 10 to 2. You want to maybe be more at a 3 or a 4 if you can. So it's really rewiring your system and working on how you do being you, really.
Mhm.
I've always said that parenting is really the quickest path to enlightenment if you take it, because we're given so many opportunities to grow and to heal as parents, because so many of our wounds are highlighted in the process of parenting, if we're
Mhm.
aware of it. And it's an amazing opportunity to heal. And
Or to
like you
heal
said,
and to
pass that on to
grow and to
our kids.
learn. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it's our nervous systems is how we experience the world around us. And if we can become masters of our nervous systems, then as you say, our kids can learn that skill through us, not by us having to teach them, but because they experience it. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Natalie.